Welcome to People Are Everything, the show that's a bit like Desert Island Discs, but rather than bring music, I ask my guests to bring the 5 people that have shaped the person they are today. And today, we're meeting Adam Bruderly. I don't know quite how to set this up in some ways, because the most, I suppose, remarkable thing about Adam is that he was a survivor of 9/11. He was actually in the second tower. And he comes on to talk about that experience and how much it shaped the person he is ever since. But there's so much more to him too. You know, he's a wealth manager, but the way he even approaches money is so much more empowering and interesting than, say, just making money for money's sake. He's a great dad. He is a great partner. He's the kind of guy that you just want in your life because there's so much substance to him. And maybe that's because of that moment on 9/11. Please listen to this episode. Adam is an extraordinary man, and I think you're really, really going to enjoy our conversation. So sit back and relax and listen to Adam Bruderly. Hello, Adam. Welcome to People Are Everything. How are you?
I am well. Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
Well, I really appreciate you getting up so early. What time is it for you right now? It's ridiculous o'clock.
9 a.m. So I've been up for four hours or so.
Well, you've got kids, right? So that means that you're going to get up way before now. I didn't know I got my time zones wrong then. I thought it was much earlier. I'm not impressed at all then if it's 9 a.m. That's nothing.
True.
Yeah. And where are you? Tell everybody where you are. Where are you?
I am in Northeast Ohio, close to Cleveland.
Oh, you know, I'll have no idea where that is. Don't you? The British, we know where we know California and New York, and that's it.
We're in the flyover states that you would consider from New York to California.
Okay.
Close to the Great Lakes, not far from New York on a plane, but yeah.
Is it very beautiful? Do you have Great Lakes? Sounds good.
The Great Lakes are beautiful, largest freshwater lakes in the world. And yeah, like, you know, what you would think, green grass, trees, farmland in the state, flat on one side, hilly on the other, bigger than you would think. But yeah, you know, it's, for me, it's my home, right? And that's my favorite part about it.
Where you grew up.
Yeah.
Yeah, nice. I mean, where have I been in the States? I guess I've been to quite a few places. Probably the nearest thing to what you've just described is Oklahoma City. I've been to Oklahoma City. That's a flyover state, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I went in, I flew in when they announced, just before I took off in the UK, when they announced the worst hurricanes predicted for over 100 years. That was the news that morning. And I was getting on a plane in Heathrow and I was like, what am I doing? Yeah. Why am I flying into Oklahoma City when they're predicting the worst tornadoes for 100 years? And they weren't kidding, because I still went, and I don't know, to this day I think, well, no meeting is that important, right? Mm-hmm. But I went anyway, and it was utter chaos. I mean, we were in this, we arrived, and it was super funny actually. The pilots back then. And I know we're going to get on to 9/11. So everything's talked about pre and post 9/11, aren't they, nowadays? Mm-hmm. But it's like pre 9/11, you could chat to the captain. And captain had his door open. And he just kept sort of leaning back, because we're in a small little plane from I can't remember now. What's the big hub? Chicago. Yeah. O'Hare, that's right. We were going from O'Hare to Oklahoma. And he sort of leaned back to our little plane of one seat on each side and went, it's going to get a bit bumpy, but don't worry, I'm going to get you home alive. And I was like, oh my God. So, and when we got there was like shards of glass falling off the skyscrapers. It was not what I'm used to. I mean, we freak out in England if there's a bit more rain than we normally get. I mean, so that's a weather event. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But no, I've been to America so many times. I love America. So, yeah. Okay. Ohio it is. I'll come and hang out with you next time
Please,
I'm over.
Anytime. Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. We'll probably talk about music. It's here.
But we have a mutual connection, don't we, in Matt Ziegler, who's become quickly a big part of my life. How about you? How did you know Matt?
I always I've started to call him the great connector,
Yeah,
um,
he is.
because I am good at weaving down roads, but long time in finance, in the wealth management space, as you know, and you touched on, right? Like that's his world in the wealth management world.
Yeah,
Um, in this, what I would call second phase or whatever we want to label it, a little bit of a pivot. I've kind of bridged this world of wealth management with, coaching or wellness or however you want to frame it, and always been a person who is pretty open, and have tried to start to tell my story a little bit more. And how does that frame into other people's worlds? And I started writing, and Matt took notice because we had some connections. And to your point, the great connector, we've become friends and haven't met in person, right? But and it's one of the beautiful things I think on the positive side of technology these days is you don't have to, and you can still have those connections if they're used in the right way.
absolutely. Oh, yes. And I know that about you both, that you're kind of similar backgrounds, professional backgrounds. So we're going to come on to, I will lead into that properly in a minute and ask you
Mhm.
to do kind of a summary of who you are and what you're all about. But what I've noticed about you, and there's another fella called Justin who I've just met, and
Mhm.
I know you two had a conversation, and Matt, and it's opened up my mind a bit because I never really thought of money from a point of view of well-being. I always thought of it as an accumulation of things, and I haven't got the world's. I don't think I've got a particularly healthy relationship with money, if I'm honest. I
Yeah.
feel like I need to keep it moving forward. I don't really like having. I don't like holding on to it. I like using it as an enabler of things.
Sure.
And then I read stuff about you and Justin and Matt, and it made me feel that it validated that thing first of all, and said actually having money to enable things is really a good thing. This is if there's ever a wholesome purpose for it, it's to put it to good work, right? But also, I loved how you guys you frame this idea of wealth management from a point of view of lifestyle, like asking questions like, "What kind of lifestyle do you want? How do you want to? What's your retirement going to look like? What kind of legacy do you want for your children? What do you want to achieve with all of this?"
Hmm.
And that's changed it for me. I see it much more as like I say, an enabler as opposed to the accumulation of wealth, which that's never really sat well with me before. Is that a fair summary of how you guys think?
I think it's spot on, right?
Oh, good.
Enabling is a wonderful word, excuse me, experiences, tool, right? Like I talk a lot about just what does wealth mean to you, right? Because
Hmm.
coming back to our mutual connection and how he writes, I think he's a wonderful writer. And so he and I will, on occasion trade some emails about a word or a phrase, or he and I went back and forth on nostalgia. And we all have definitions, right? Like we put these definitions on words and they can mean so many things to us. And I think that is it, right? And I talk about wealth a lot.
Hmm.
And what is your definition of wealth, right? Like, and we've seen this in stories told over generations. We've seen this in our own lives, but like, you could look at two people and one could be worth all the money in the world and one could just, have the things on their back, right? And one could feel much wealthier than the other. And it's not the one we often may think of.
Hmm.
And I think that's what you're, playing back a little bit is like, I have this tool, how can I use it to make me wealthy beyond that balance sheet or
Yeah.
all the things, right? It's the experiences and it's the dinner with friends, right? That you have at this beautiful restaurant, maybe sitting at the ocean, and it's not the prices on the menu; it's the experience itself and what it
Yeah.
has allowed you to do. So, 100%.
Oh, good. I'm on the right tracks. This is good. Do you want to take me on as a client? I don't have any money though. Maybe we need money first for wealth management.
No, not at all.
Okay, so listen. Well, that's a nice segue, isn't it? Into just a little kind of potted overview of who you are and what you're all about. And obviously, I have kind of teed you up a little bit about.
Yeah.
I hope you're going to talk about 903 and all of that how that shaped you and kind of changed your whole life.
Yeah. 100%, right? So maybe I'll kind of give you the how did I arrive with that narrative I just talked about, right? And by the way, I'm a soapboxer, so you're going to have to pull me in at times, but
I'll get a bell, ding it.
yes, get the bell up. Yeah, I kind of back to I'm pretty good at kind of compressing, but born and raised in the Midwest here, went to college. I came from parents that were both teachers, right? Small town, 20 some thousand people, old steel town in the Midwest in Ohio, and ended up in college, played some sports. And I frame all that because it was the story we all want to tell ourselves, right? And that your parents want to tell you, meaning they all, we want a better life, right? For our next generation. Like that's just what we want to do. So when I went to school, I became a finance major, and like everybody else, right? Finance, you get into the numbers world. That leads into money is tied to almost everything in finance, right? Like,
Goes with
and
a job.
yeah, coming out of school, I graduated college in 2001, and coming out, it was after the first dot-com bubble, and I was like, I'll take whatever I can get, right? Like whatever job I can get. My parents were like, "You're not coming home. Like you need to get a real job and get it together."
We've changed the room.
Yes.
Your bed's not there anymore. It's an office. Yeah.
And I ended up taking a job with Morgan Stanley Dean Witter here, and a part of that was heading off to New York to kind of go through like what they would classify as like a training program. So I was headed in and moved there, in which really sets up, I think, what you were just saying. It's funny you said it in like traveling terms, right? There's pre and post 9/11,
Yeah.
and that's really kind of the story of my life, because there's the pre version, the one that was naive, young, knucklehead, doing all the things you typically do at that age, not fully formed, goofy in many ways, and just living a life where what I was told, right? Like even when you're in school, it's like you come out and like how much money can you earn? What kind of a job can you get? What titles can you achieve? I even remember when I got to Morgan Stanley Dean Witter, and to no fault of their own, right? Like what got dangled is, hey, how many things can you do, right? And how much more money can you bring in? And that's going to give you a bigger title and make you more money. So that's what your behavior should be, right? Like all the behavior should be equated to that. Which again, at 22, then in New York, and we can probably tell where this story's going is, I was working in the World Trade Centers on 9/11. The program and where I was working in Tower 2 on the 61st floor on that day. And I always tell people, like, there was the version before, which I kind of described a little bit, and then there was the version after. And, on that day, right, happy to touch on a little bit or dive as much as you would like, but, I was... Oh yeah, please go jump in.
Well, no, I tell you, there's a detail, because I have listened to previous podcasts you've been on, and there was a detail of it that really stuck with me, because I'm picturing you at 22. My son's 21, right, and I love him so much, but could I rely upon him to safely come down 61 flights of stairs and have the instincts that you had? Like, there's that one piece where you said some people were going back to their offices, but you kept going. So I'm just going to make sure you definitely include that bit, because that's the bit that really struck me. I was like, wow, okay. So I hope I haven't kind of rolled forward too quickly for you.
No, you're right.
Is that my dog? Oh my goodness. Adam, she gets on every single podcast. She's always barking.
Needs to make sure he's in.
Honestly. Sorry, everybody. It's her again, Maggie. So, Adam, sorry. I just want to make sure you include that piece, because that was the bit I thought was really interesting from a point of view of wherewithal.
So, Yeah, Tower Two. So Tower Two was the one that was hit hit second but fell
Mm.
first.
Mm.
So working on 61 on a break, fire alarm goes off, and no one, honestly, no one. Again, and especially now, right? Like we can have the conversation about memories, right, and how well people recall. I've told the story a little bit after, so I've always kind of gone back to some of the things when I wrote down. But fire alarm goes off, start heading down the steps. I don't know what stairwell I was in. It was too wide, is what I vividly remember, and began walking down, right? Because they said, hey, it's a fire alarm, it's a fire drill, whatever language you want to use, you start walking down the steps because you can't use the elevators and all that stuff. And I started walking down naively. No one had any idea what was going on. And you started heading down, probably got into, right, the lower 50s. And this has kind of been told in multiple stories or documentaries and all that. But something came over the PA, and it was, hey, this is a drill, or this, you can go back to your seats or your offices. And, I think that kind of maybe sticks out for a few different reasons. But, for me, right, you had the grizzled New York veterans, right? Like the
Yeah.
people who
Who've
have been
been
there.
through so many of those. Oh, goodness, let's get back to
Yeah.
our desks.
And they're like, what does this matter?
Mm.
There was a book on stress and kind of those traumatic incidents that I read years later that used that as like a big narrative of the work this person did. But yeah, they went back, right? And again, when I look back and reflect on it, hearing that, 22, naive, really had no idea what was going on. And I think a part of me, and I'd love to say it was like wisdom or knowledge or all these things, it was like, hey, I don't know what's going on, but if I just keep walking, at least I don't have to work for the next few hours. And I'm just going to keep heading down these steps. And I do remember this conversation. I was walking with another young man, and there was going to be a fight at Madison Square Garden, a boxing match that following weekend. And we were just chatting, like, oh, maybe we should go to this thing, right? I was in New York. I grew up in the Midwest. I had been on a plane before the age of 18 twice in my life. We took one summer vacation every year, right? Like, and we drove to the Carolinas. And so all this was very different for me. And
Mm.
I got down and was chatting with him and got down into the 40s. And all of a sudden, you heard a loud noise and the building started to sway.
Mm.
And you knew, like, oh, this is definitely not good. You could definitely hear panic, right? Like, I remember a construction worker screamed. I don't, whether what she was doing, I don't know, but and you just, like, that's when, right, you can kind of, you've probably been in rooms, probably on plane flights, right? You get that heavy turbulence and you can kind of feel
Yeah.
that
Every,
feeling. Everyone's on.
everyone's energy changes. Yeah, yeah.
Mhm. That's exactly what it was.
Mm.
But the only choice you had was to just keep walking down. And I will say people orderly just kept walking down. Um, and I got down and it kept going, and, time, whether it's sped up or slowed down, I couldn't tell you. And got down into, like, the single digits ish. And I still remember, right? Like, cause I'm headed down and there goes the fireman heading up.
Mm.
And they got all their gear on, and you're like, oh, this is real. Like, this is bad. Again, not to the extent, I don't think what we really understood, but you kept walking down, and they're like, evacuate, go this way. You get down to the levels, the World Trade Center complex. I'm sure you had been there, right? It was massive. The lobbies were massive. The elevators are massive. It's just like, it's on that scale of, like, you're in New York, which is massive in and of itself, and then these, like,
Mm.
famous buildings, right, that are just huge in there. And the policemen are telling you, like, hey, go this way, get out, evacuate this way, because the lobby had been destroyed. And to this day, I couldn't tell you what side I walked out or where I was, but I remember looking out the glass windows and just seeing the debris and walking out and looking up. And that's when it was like, it's like, as someone who's a runner these days, who played sports, like, it was kind of like, the air kind of sucks out of you, and like the surreal kind of punches you in the stomach, and like this is real, and this is really bad, right? There's two buildings burning on fire. There's stuff all over the place. People are standing around looking up, and you just didn't understand, right? Because again, it was a pre and post version of America, honestly, at
Yeah,
that
yeah,
point, right? No one thought, right? Like the first plane was an accident, is what everyone thought.
yeah.
So no one, like the first conclusion was absolutely not like terrorism, intentionality, and all those things. And I walked around and I looked up, and you watched and you kind of saw all the stuff that was happening that people have watched documentaries or read in books. And again, back to that naive, young individual, I'm standing there. I couldn't tell you how long. And I knew a couple people I was with. Two were from Ohio, one I was with, and I'm like, this is probably not the best place to hang around. Like, could the building go this way, or like, I don't know. Like, and you're just kind of watching the scene in of itself, and it just didn't feel like a place you wanted to be. Um, so I said, like, we should not be here, and started
Mm.
walking and headed up towards Midtown, which is where I was staying. And it was like on the walk back, right? Like, and you remember the faces, like we've all seen movies these days, all the action stuff, whether taking place in London or New York or LA, right? Like, but imagine those cities just at standstill traffic with doors wide open and people listening to radios and no one knowing what to do, just people crying randomly on the sidewalks. And got probably like 5 blocks ish away because I wasn't in the stuff, but all of a sudden you heard what sounded like thunder and turned around, and the tower that I was in had just left was coming down. And you kind of saw that puff of smoke, right? Like puff big,
Yeah, yeah.
and you just kept walking. And you're like, again, that's when it was like, it just all became truly surreal. Like you just, nothing seemed like everything was in slow motion and nothing was real. And you kept walking. I remember there's probably like my first real cell phone that I had at that time, right? Because it's '01. But the cell towers were on top of those buildings. So cell phones stopped working. And there were still payphones back then. And you just kept walking. And all of a sudden, like there's 30 people, 40 people deep at these things because it was the
Mm.
only way to really communicate on a street. And so nothing worked. So I was like, well, your option is to walk back to Midtown by Madison Square Garden and just keep going. And that's what I did.
And there must have, I mean, there's so many questions, Adam. I
Yeah.
mean, okay, so I mean, I'm completely immersed in your story. Firstly, like I'm there with you, and there's so much footage. You can't. I don't even have to imagine that much because that was one of the most striking things about that whole thing. There was so much different perspectives that were shared on the television. But you're the first person I've ever met or spoken to who was actually there. So your account of it is just giving me absolute chills. And it was what 20 something years ago. And we all remember where we were the time that first plane hit. And you're right, we all thought, wow, how did that happen? Like that plane's seriously off course. And then, of course, the second one hits, and then we all have a different understanding. But it's like, first of all, there must have been a fairly big gap between you coming out and it collapsing. And let's say there's no payphones. Now, I mean, I'm literally the reason I've gone cold is, of course, my son's the same age, and I'm just thinking there must be a big gap between the world knowing that this has just happened, and your mum and dad knowing that you work at the World Trade Center, and they're just desperately trying to wait for a phone call. I imagine they are absolutely beside themselves. How big a gap was that? And then did you have, obviously you made a call at some point, and what was that like?
Yeah, it was hours because,
Hours.
yeah,
Oof.
I mean, the walk is probably right. My building was hit at 9:03, which is kind of the
Mm.
number you recognize early because I say that is the number in my life that has meant a lot. Um, Walked out probably about 45-ish minutes or so. Buildings came down at like 9:50 or ish. In Midtown's like it's probably like a 2+ mile walk. So
Yeah.
maybe three-ish, give or take.
Hmm.
So yeah, it's a couple hours by the time you got out of there. I wish I had a detailed account of time right now with all the phones you would have had like all of the you'd have your GPS walk on there and
Yeah.
everything
Yeah.
probably. But yeah, I mean you hit on the point that I think for me for years has been the kind of the one thing that has truly stuck with me because I've had some of those feelings about what you just said. My parents were both teachers in the community. Both taught there for 30 years plus, and they were still teaching at the time. And it's funny, right? We just, my kids are 10 and 7, so they can't even comprehend this, but there's no Twitter, there's no Instagram, there's no
Hmm.
social media, there's no 24-hour news feed. None of that stuff existed. You had the old big TVs on the like on the walls in
Yeah.
the classrooms, and my mom taught kindergarten in elementary school, and my father taught at the high school. Um, I wasn't far removed, right, from the high school, to be honest with you. So all the teachers I had and the people who knew me growing up as a kid were all still there, and both of their principals went and because they didn't couldn't get a text message, right, went down and knocked on their door and kind of did one of those like, hey, can you
Mm.
step outside? Kind of we need to talk to you, and said, hey, we know Adam's in New York, you need to come here. And they went down and showed them and told them what happened. um, you know Pretty quickly after, right, the actual planes hit the towers, and it was in that gap. And the word gap is something I think about a lot. There's a Frankel quote that I always think about. I would butcher it if I said it out loud, but it's really about like between stimulus and response, there's this space, and in that space,
Mm.
growth and freedom, right, is kind of the
Hmm.
paraphrase. And I think about the gap a lot because like the stimulus of my parents being told that, and then that gap of when they finally found out, right, what's their response. And it was in that phone call. So I got back to where I was staying and made that call. And I feel like I can still like hear my mom, right? Because her first thing is she hears her son. And again, it's not like I didn't grow up in these big cities. We didn't do these things. It was, and like their son is away, right? And in this big city, and that happens. And I remember she just started bawling, right? Like just started crying. And the biggest thing is like from that takeaway is like I don't think I understood what that meant at the time,
No.
right? Like other than like there's like anything else, like the when we talked about words, emotions, conversation, everything's multiple layers deep, right? Like we know that now, or I know that now. I didn't know what that meant for my mom other than, oh, he's okay, like, right. And that
Hmm.
is like, is that relief?
But now you've got your own kids, I'm sure it means a hell of a
uh,
lot more.
like when I had
Mm.
my own kids, and they are now, my oldest turned 10 last week. um, it's hard to even comprehend, right?
Yeah.
Like I can't imagine. There's another beautiful I love quotes, but there's like the quote is something of, when you choose to have children, you're basically choosing to wear your heart outside the body the rest of your life.
Oh yes, tell me about it.
Yeah, and you
A
get
bleeding heart, Adam.
yeah,
Oof.
and I can't like putting them through that 2 hours. I can't imagine.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
still sticks to me this day. Like
Mm. I
it,
imagine this is one of those things. I mean, we've got to get we could talk about this for the whole podcast if you want, because I
I'll
would.
think of anything.
But I think we probably ought to do the format a bit.
Yeah.
But I imagine, well, I know this about you because we spoke before we recorded. That it was a defining day for the world, let alone for you personally. I mean, and I imagine everything tracks back to that from now on. I imagine everything is framed with that experience.
Mhm.
Even probably how you parent, how you friend, how you work, how you partner, how you son. I've just made up all these funny ways of saying things. Never mind, I've just come up with that. You know what I mean? How you are with all the key relationships. I imagine that's completely altered from that formative experience. And well, it's probably going to be a theme throughout then, so we're going to get into the 5 in a minute. But I suddenly feel like I don't know. I suppose there's a part of me now that, against that backdrop, feels that this is quite a frivolous exercise. You know what I mean? There's a frivolousness to it, and I don't want to be, dismissive of this format. But I'm hoping it's still going to have some substance, because after an opener like that, it's it does put everything into perspective. But listen, let's do it anyway, and let's see who comes out. I'm really intrigued to who your 5 are. But also, my question to all my guests, first of all, is how did you find choosing your 5? Was it easy, hard, torturous? What was it like?
I tend to think, and it's funny. I think I was actually trading a little bit of this with Matt and Justin just after Justin proposed. He did some writing and mentioned you, and then we traded a few things. I think, like all of us, and you probably even experienced this personally, and I'm sure you're seeing this in your son. We all go through stages of life when different people and different things have different impacts on us.
Yeah.
What I tried to do was step back and say, like, in my entire cycle or glide path, like, who have been my big 5, right? Recently, I've thrown myself into a lot of reading, and like, there's a wonderful, wonderful woman named Edith Eger who wrote The Choice and The Gift. But like recently, for example, she's been like so impactful. Her writing, she's in her 90s, and she was a Holocaust survivor at Auschwitz and went with her. So, like, her story for me was about, like, she talks a lot about releasing identity and the trauma and all those things. But she's not one, but like, she's been a recent one, right?
I wrote it down because I want to read it. That's all. I'm not including her.
So yeah, I'm like, don't use up my one. Don't use it up yet. But what I tried to step back and say, my full glide path.
Yeah.
Like, who are my 5? And
that's a good way of doing it. That's a good way of doing it. Matt did all the people that he loved and lost, and I thought that was a really wonderful way of paying tribute to those guys. And I don't think there's been anyone who's done the same thing, actually. That's why I like to ask the question, because I think it's actually firstly reveals a little bit about you, but also just how hard it is actually to think of just 5. And some people cheat. Helen Normoyle, if you're listening, had about 20. I mean, literally, I see she shoved so many in. It was very naughty. But yeah, so we will try and stay with the 5. Okay, that's really interesting. Let's get into it then. Who is number 1?
In no particular order. I have to preface that, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to start with my father.
Okay.
And mine may be stereotypical, but I think what you'll hopefully get is there's an underlying unique narrative to all of it. But my dad, like, my dad was raised in a household with his father who left school at 8th grade, grew up in the Great Depression, served in World War II, right? Like, just, like that, like, raised in a household of the greatest generation. And so many things that came from my grandfather to my dad, were passed to me. And like, there's certain things he has said over the years, right? Sports were really important in my life growing up for a lot of reasons. He played sports and as a young kid, right? Like, never would I ask, can you go throw me pitches? Can you play catch? Would he ever say no? Ever.
Yeah.
Right? Like, and I know that sounds so simple, but right, like, in the world we live in now, that is not common.
No.
And, like, there's something he would always tell me that still sticks to this day. Is like, if you're going to do something, you do it right. Right? No matter what it is, whether you're painting your room or, washing your car or doing your actual job or whatever it is, like, you do it the right way. Like, that's just how you show up in life. And like those are things that are hard for me to express, right? Because like my parents now live, I lived out west for 13 years and we came home because of them, right? And I really started asking later, like how many summers? And what I meant was like, how many summers did I have left? How many summers did they have left? How many summers would I get to spend with those people? And they live 4 minutes away, right? My son had his birthday parties with his friends, and my parents made all the cookies for the party. And my son we have a night baseball game tonight, and they're gonna be there. And he set up a little hitting thing in the garage for my boys to hit off the tee, and he can work with them. Like there are a few things that make me happier in my life than having that. And it's
Mm.
like it's hard to express the gratitude to the story I want to tell real quick because like we were at a charity event with friends for the Ronald McDonald House, which is like it's a like they it's a large U.S. charity, and it like they're around hospitals, and what they do is put up people who can't afford and they help
Okay.
support them. So we were at the event, and our friends own a brewing company, and one of the auction items at the live auction is you get to be a brewer for a day. And so we were there like 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, and my wife's like, "We're gonna win this," and I'm like, "Okay, yeah." And we win, right? And we had like, I'm going somewhere with this, I swear, but is it wasn't just about winning it, and it wasn't just about the beer. It was like what I wanted to do with it. And it was kind of what you expressed a little bit earlier about like what you can do with money.
Yeah.
And it wasn't crazy, but it was like what I wanted to do was I'm going to go brew this. It'll sit on tap at the brewery down the road, which we go to all the time and our friends, and it's wonderful. It'll sit on tap, and all the proceeds go to the Ronald McDonald House that they sell for the entire year. But it's what it is. Like I had already known the minute we won it, I wanted to name it after my dad. So I'm naming the beer after him. He will be on the label. And I'm going to express this label real quick. He'd probably be mad, but because we're telling him for Father's Day, but it's named after him, and it's him. He used to get off work because he worked in the summers. They were teachers, so he'd work all summer, cutting grass, mowing lawns, doing all these things, and he'd get home. And I worked with him when I was growing up, and he'd be all dirty, right, coming in, throw his clothes off, and he would sit in like a white T-shirt and his underwear, and he would have a beer, and he would get the records out, and he would like, my love for music is him, and that's the picture I want is him like in his ball cap with his mustache, sitting at that table in a pair, and just talking about music, and it's like that's like my thank you. I don't know if it's a weird thank you, but like that
I
is
mean,
it.
it's a great idea. I
Um,
because sorry, I was cutting across.
no, like yeah, and that's it, right? Like that's him, and that's who I
Yeah,
remember.
that's such a quintessential image. I mean, honestly, that's like the perfect image of if I may say, an American dad.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
yeah.
I watched enough movies to have that image, you know. And there's a couple of things there. First of all, well done having a friend with a brewery. Like that's like my dream friend. Anybody out there with a brewery, I'd really like to be friends with you, please. So that's awesome. And I suppose, you know, hearing how you talk about him, I imagine then that he's a huge influence on how you want to be as a dad. So do you find yourself thinking about him in your day-to-day dad stuff?
Yeah, every day. We lived out west for 13 years. I used to travel a lot for work. I was on the road 38 to 42 weeks a year. My wife was doing her residency. We didn't have kids yet. And I remember like I'd be in the airport and I would call him. Like, and for most of my life, like I would call him 3, 4 times a week. He'd be like, "Where are you? Like, what airport are you in, or what city?" And you talk about Cleveland sports or just catch up or whatever it is. And like the unique piece of that is the fact that I'm going to be 46 here in a few months and I still have that type of a relationship,
Yeah,
right? Like,
that's
and that's my
amazing.
favorite thing. And all the other stuff, right? Seeing him every day, and I give him punch lists, and he, does stuff around my house, blah blah blah, just keeps him busy. And but it's like if I have that with my kids,
Yeah, you'll be
30
made up.
years, like something went right.
Yeah.
I don't have that without him.
Yeah. And him and his father before him.
Hmm.
And yeah, I mean it's such this idea of modeling. You either go one or the other, don't you? You either absolutely look backwards against your predecessors and say, if I can only be as good as them, I'll be happy. If I can only have their qualities or bring bring what they taught me into my parenting. And then there's those who go, whatever he did, I'm not doing that. You know what I mean? Going rejecting completely. And I just feel like there is still a pressure. There's still a fallout with having a dad like that. It builds a certain pressure on you to kind of be a certain way and achieve a certain amount of things. But I think, as opposed to having a dad that you absolutely kick against, which must take extraordinary amounts of energy. And I say it like it hadn't happened to me. I was that kid, actually. I kicked against my dad quite a lot. But it's like, it's so much more wholesome, so much more rewarding and enriching if it's the first one. And the idea of summers, I think we've talked about this, or I certainly talk about summers, and how I tend to count them. Until I met Nancy Berger. I don't know if you heard the podcast I did I did Just Press Record with Matt Ziegler and Nancy Berger, and she told me off for that. She said no more counting summers. So I'm going to pass this on to you, Adam. She was like, it just can take away a little bit of the fun of the moment if you keep thinking about the clock counting down. So I'm trying hard not to do it. But I'm with you. I'm like, I'm mid-50s now, and I look at my life and I go, how many summers have I got left? Okay, count them up. And that's like, none of us know anyway, so it's a pointless exercise. But also, it does sometimes dampen the mood when I go, oh, then in 10 years now I'll be 65 and my legs probably will hurt a bit. And, it's like, well, live now. Now is good.
Yeah.
Just, that's the Nancy's message was, stop counting the summers. So have a think about that, Adam. Nancy, if you're listening, I'm passing it on.
That's funny. So you would not approve of the 4K weeks I have right back here that measures my weeks and years, and it's
wow,
a little black dot for each week.
Gosh, okay, that's taking it to a whole new level, Adam.
Well, and I think for me, I'm the opposite. I think if anything, I'm comfortable with it. I love stoicism. I wear a memento mori around my neck every day, right? And for me, it's a little different because I think, coming back to that example on 9/11, right? Like, you're at the precipice. I'm not saying I was, because there's so many other terrible stories, right, that came out of that. And that's the one I always struggle with but like there is another side. Like we can sometimes get caught in the languishing of the trap where we do forget, right? Like none of this is guaranteed.
I know. Do you know what? I'm so glad you brought it around to that. So Nancy, forget it. I'm not listening to you anymore.
Sorry,
Adam and I have got it worked out. We know that the best bit about counting the summers is it makes you very purposeful. It makes you very intentional. It says, let's not be sleeping at the wheel here of life. Let's go at it, knowing that it's going to run out. And I'm learning about the Stoics. I'm very undereducated, which I love telling everybody about. Maybe I should stop. But I didn't really do a lot of formal education, but I'm a lifelong learner. And the Stoics, I was listening to a podcast by Sam Harris. Do you know Sam Harris?
Yep.
And he just did a whole episode on the Stoics, and that was really interesting. So
Yep.
I probably am more cut from that cloth as well, Adam. I think it's important to kind of, it's a way of honoring time and being realistic and practical about it as well.
Right.
So
it's there's a quote that's attributed to the Buddha, but like the trouble is you think you have time.
Yeah, and we're just a blink in the eye blink of. Oh well, you get my point. So okay, well that's Dad. He sounds absolutely brilliant. I imagine he's got. I don't know. I've got this vision of him now in a scruffy sort of, hat and having big forearms. I don't know why. Has he got big forearms?
No, I mean he would tell you. He tells my son. He tells my youngest, and my youngest yells at him all the time. He's like, he played baseball. My dad played baseball in college, and he says like I was scouted by the Yankees, and then he says I played. He tells my youngest I played for the Yankees, and yet my 7-year-old's like, no, you didn't. You didn't. But it's right. Like it's funny you say that, right? Like because he's older now. He's 73, but the picture on that beer can or image, right, is that guy who is probably close to my age, right? And I just see, right, and it will always be the image in my head.
Yeah, good for you. I like it. Send me a bottle of the beer. I would like some, please. All right. Well done, Dad. Okay, good. Who's number 2?
A teacher, Mr. James Ballard.
James Ballard.
Yes, he was. Like I said, I grew up here in the Midwest in Ohio. I grew up in a town called Alliance, which is an old steel town. Went to a public school, and like it wasn't like again back to the world we live in now, right? Like the idea of AP classes and getting above a 4.0, right? When you stack up all these things and like 18 extracurriculars to get into the most amazing school, like that stuff wasn't there, right?
Yeah.
It was a public school and not the best district, which for me, reflecting back, actually taught me so much. But there was a teacher there, James Ballard, and he was the English teacher. And like picturing this guy, he had the Yosemite Sam mustache, right? Like this wispy thing. He drove an El Camino. I don't even know if you know what that is, but it's
I
like
do.
yes, he had
Yeah.
an El Camino, and he was a smoker, and you could like he would wear tweed coats, but he was like the most unique, brilliant teacher I ever had in my life. He was like 6'6". He was running with the Bulls in Pamplona for 30 years. And this is going back to the 90s. He'd been running with them in the 70s, going to the Globe Theater to recite Shakespeare, doing Cannonball Run when it was like first started. He tried out for Jeopardy, got on, beat the guy who went on to win a bunch of times, but said, I can't go because I can only go during this week or this month of the year because I have school teaching. I have to go to Pamplona, like, and all these things. Like, and he would teach literature and introduce me to Julius Caesar and like talked about music because I took this humanities class that he would always teach. And what he taught me, which again, when you're young, you don't really understand. It's like the layers, right? Like I understood from a top layer, but I didn't really understand the layers. And what he taught me was curiosity, like the idea it's okay to be into a bunch of different things. The okay that there's this whole world out there that you probably don't know about yet. But the best thing in life you can do is start to ask the questions about what is it and is it out there?
He
yeah.
kind of sounds almost unreal, Adam. Did you dream him?
No,
I'm just thinking, and did he really run with bulls? We're talking about actual running with bulls, not a euphemism for something, aren't we? We are talking about actual bulls.
He broke his leg and was on like the Maury Povich show because of it. Like I know he sounds like the most made up individual. You can Google him. He has since passed away of cancer because he was a smoker. But I was thinking about it in this exercise of kind of jotting some notes down because I was thinking like, and I couldn't remember the exact time, but the teachers I remember, like again, my parents were teachers. They were friends with all these people. They were doing a baseball game, and I think we were home from living out west. I was still in my 20s, but it's funny. Like, went to the baseball game with my parents. He was there, and I got to buy him a beer, and I got to just say thank you, right? Like, I got to say thank you to him because, like, again, you're naive. I was 18 years old, like, when I graduated, right? But I got to say him like thank you, right? Like, because that curiosity that came after 9/11 was probably a part of him, right? Like that seed was planted. It just took a bunch of different things for it to grow. And right, I have a thing to the side here where I keep a lot of mementos or little things. And like I pulled this off today because I still have a signed copy from him of Don Quixote that he gave me in that class. And like it's sitting there because it just helps, like curiosity can be a superpower if you use it in the right way. And
Oh, completely. I mean,
so,
okay, so let me just pull those things together then, because I imagine if you had a life altering, completely, changing your whole perception probably of time, and that people talk about when they've had a near death experience that everything just becomes brighter, and then you meet. Hang on, I'm going to get his name right. James Baller. Is that right?
mhm.
He he does sound. I mean, we have an expression in the UK called a baller. Do you know what that means?
Yeah.
Oh, when you're a baller, it's like you've got a lot of money, you're a bit flashy, you but I mean, he may not have been flashy or particularly financially well off, but he is a baller in terms of this big, larger than life character, right? And I imagine that curiosity, meeting somebody who's got an intensity of a lust for life because they've had that great kind of defining, near death experience. You put those two together, that's a rich life. That's a richness. That's a gift. Those bringing those two component parts and saying, right, I'm going to make you intensely focused on time, and I'm going to give you an intense curiosity to make the most of it. Am I right? Am I in the kind of right area?
No, that's right. Like the seed that he planted when I was in high school, and then 9/11, I think, released it, is what I think happened for me, at least, because I started to think about what it's like back to what you talked a little about earlier. He wasn't he was a teacher, right?
Yeah.
Like it's an underpaid profession, in my opinion,
Yeah, I
for
agree.
many reasons. We could, have those conversations, but I mean, there's a man who like lived 100 different ways with an infinite amount of wealth in experiences,
Yeah.
right? Like, just incredible.
It's almost like five lives,
Yeah,
all at once, all simultaneously.
I
That's
mean, right, like I played indoor soccer with a bunch of my buddies. We were just a bunch of knucklehead guys, right? Like all played sports. We weren't soccer players, but we did it for fun. You played in the evenings when we were in high school, and you had to have an adult standing on the sideline over the age of 18. And that's the gentleman we got to show up. And he'd show up in cowboy boots, and we made these shirts, and we gave him one, and it was like coach across the front.
yeah,
But he was willing to do that.
yeah,
And it's just to your point, the larger than life
yeah.
individual.
Oh, how lucky to meet him. I'm sorry he's not still with us to hear all of this. Did you? I mean, I imagine you, like you say, you found your way to say thank you.
Yeah, being at that baseball game, like, and buying, right? It's not. It's like, here in the U.S., right? Like baseball is America's pastime, and there are a few things better than on like a warm day sitting outside watching a baseball game, and it's that whole shared experience of like just the gesture of like, hey, thank you, here, I
Yeah,
appreciate it, and
I like that.
there's not many other words you even have to share, right? Like,
Yeah, yeah. I'm going to my first baseball game, by the way. I've got tickets for Fenway Park
that's beautiful.
in
It's amazing.
in the fall. Boston in the fall. I was told that was like a cool thing to do. So I've bought Fenway Park tickets. Just
It's
saying.
it's wonderful.
Oh, well, I love the sound of him, and hope he's enjoying whatever multiple lives he's living now somewhere else. You can imagine he's cramming it in, or maybe he's having a rest. Who knows?
Yeah.
All right. Well, listen. Thank you for that. What about number three? Who's number three?
Staying on the theme of cliche, my wife.
Okay.
Yeah. So we met the summer going into my senior year at a house party. I was at her house. She had no idea who I was, right? Like I was with friends. I had a friend who was dating her roommate. She had no idea who I was. We met, and that was it. I was like, oh, yeah, she would be wonderful. But that was about it. And then we crossed paths a few times, but we met really like late first semester of my senior year. She was a year behind me.
Can you just for us Brits, what age would you have been roughly? What is that?
I was 21. I had turned 21 going into my senior
21.
year. Yeah. I was that pre 9/11 knucklehead. I use that term a lot. She was brilliant in so many ways. And what I mean by that is like she was literally intellectually, one of the smartest people I've ever met. I always joke, we joke and tell people, and she'll verify it. Like I needed a few semesters to add up to her GPA. Like,
Did a few night schools.
I was not the best student. I like to have had a little too much fun. Probably wasn't as
Mm,
engaged as I should have been. Um, but we were dating, and we were dating on when I was in 9/11. Um,
mm,
and she was like of those calls, right? Like that call to my parents and call to her. Um, but it was really the after part, right? And what I mean by that, like, so I was 22 and I was a knucklehead, and I'm still kind of, you're not like you're not fully formed. I mean, like literally, you're not. Your brain isn't even
mm,
fully
mm,
formed, till you're 26, 27. And I didn't know what I wanted in life, and I was just that typical, right, of age. I came home, and the part I probably struggled with or expressed was coming back, right, like looking back, it was a traumatic experience. There's no other way to kind of
mm,
express it. And in that time, again, back in the Midwest, right, it's funny, this would never happen now in a corporate setting, but I don't remember them like sending therapists or
mm.
talk to you. It wasn't really something I did. No one was like, hey, you really need to go sit down with a therapist, or you need to
Yeah.
process anything. I think about 3 weeks later they were like, hey, you need to come back to work. But I probably wasn't, I didn't have my
No.
head on straight. Like there's,
No.
knowing what I know now in the world I live in now, like meaning even work wise, I didn't have my head on straight.
Mm,
I was a mess, probably. It wasn't coming out like terribly, but I wasn't all there. And she was the one who probably felt that the most, right? Because she's right there. We're dating. She's in school. Like I said, she was brilliant and wonderful and hardworking, and I mean all of the attributes you can kind of think of. And and there I am, probably what I would kind of like floundering, languishing, like just not in a good space. And you know, there was a day she's getting ready to leave for med school, and she like I remember we were like at a public pool area, and she was like, "This is a no go." She's like, "You either get it together,
mm.
this doesn't work."
Yeah.
Um, and you're like it was like one of those, okay, like, but looking back, without that, I don't know what happens, right? Like I don't.
Well, it was a
Like,
huge risk that she took, but she took it for you,
mhm.
really.
Yeah,
Because, you know, she could have easily just sat back and watched the slow
yeah,
decline of you.
and
But
it
she
was
was, but
sort
she
of
was brave. She was brave. She said, "Right, I'm going to call the time out on this and
yeah,
say this needs to change and give you that kind of wake up call." And that's very brave. That's definitely a form of love.
yeah.
So anyway, so she called the time out, and then what happened?
She called the timeout, and to your point, there was a slow to mind. Like
Hmm.
around this time was like one of those rock bottom type moments that people express. I remember again here in the U.S. you can go to like a CVS and buy really bad vodka, um,
Oof.
and like at that age, I remember she wasn't with me that evening, but I don't know whether she had been back to school or wherever. But I remember like literally, I think polishing off almost the whole thing, going out with friends, still
Oof.
drinking. They're like, we can't tolerate you. Like we're leaving. So they just left because we don't want to deal with you. And
Hmm.
I remember like I ended up in the back of the police car, and two guys I knew who I went to college with walked by serendipitously, and we're like, we know that guy. We'll take him. We'll take him. I woke up the next morning. I'm like, one of those. You're like, wait, what happened and where am I? Um, because the other side of that coin, right, is like you're in jail and you're 23, and and I share that not like out of, but just like where like the trend of where I was.
Yeah, how far you kind of gone in that direction. I know
Yeah.
I can totally understand. Totally understand.
Um, and it was like she probably saw that and she's like, I can't do this. Like she
Yeah.
had like her whole life ahead of her in a very positive way. Like I said, she's a physician and a brilliant doctor and
Hmm.
a wonderful mom and daughter and all the things. And she's like, what am I doing with this guy? Right? Like he's
I
enough.
did. Yeah, but you keep saying that. I'm not convinced. I need to meet your wife. I honestly think it was because you can see somebody struggling and go, I'm not going to hang out with this guy. You know what I mean? But people who don't care about you just walk off.
Yeah.
They don't say anything. They
No.
just mute you out of their lives, and but it takes something to stop and confront it and say something. That's you don't do that unless you love someone. I always say this to people. I only argue with the people I care about, because if I don't care about you, I don't care about you. So I'm not going to argue with you or confront you or get into any kind of conflict with you, because I don't know you and I don't
Yep.
care about you. So yeah, you probably were a knucklehead, but not the way you are kind of diminishing, I think. And who am I anyway? I'm just
No,
met, just
I
met
mean,
you, but you know what I mean. You're getting my point. I don't think she meant as in I need to get away from this guy. I've got a life to live. I think it was like I need to do an intervention, and
yeah, that's
I need to give him something to think about. That's how I'm
right.
reading it.
Well, and it was
So
exactly that.
there,
It was taking that person she thought she knew and saying, "Look, we need to pull him out of this."
yeah,
And so the reason I share those things because it really sets up, right? Like that. Hey, you need to get it together. Really became what I say is a 1 + 1 = 3 for me. Like she
mm,
was that moment plus her was 3,
yeah,
right? Like the simple math we think of is 1 + 1 = 2.
yeah. But this was 1 + 1 equals much bigger than
Yeah,
the sum of the two parts. Yeah.
because her asking that question had me reflecting inward.
Mm.
And at that time, I was playing sport. I had played sports. I was a bit individual in college, and all that had stopped. And what I mean is, I was probably at 205. I, could spend $20 at a fast food menu, eat it all, right? You're not engaged. You're not taking. I'm not reading books. I'm watching 3 hours of old DVDs every night, right? Like you're going out 2 or 3, 4 nights a week. What happened was she was not, right? And she was like, well, why don't we go running? And I shared this
Mm.
because this is the theme that became very important in my life. She's like, I'm going to drag you out. And, we went for a run. It was like probably 2 miles. For me, it felt like 20, right? Like I was in terrible shape, like cardio and all that stuff wise. But it was both miserable and exhilarating at the same time.
Yeah.
And right? Like it's back to that 1 + 1 = 3 because she spurs that moment, and that physical engagement, that run, that exercise, that became my thing. It became my version of processing. It became my version of reflection. It became all the positive things from that snowballed in my life to, she always jokes now, like I'm the one who like now we're stuck in this world of him, running, marathons and Ironmans and 100-mile runs and
Do you
all of
do
that.
all of that?
I do. Uh,
Oh God.
I haven't done Ironman in a long time, but yeah, still into a lot of those things. A little bit of climbing and back to that curiosity thing. Curiosity in the knowledge and books and those things, but curiosity in the physical discomfort, right, and all that. But it was her, right? She has supported, she has embraced. We have done the adventures together and the experiences and the travel. We get up and work out early, both of us. She's committed those things in her life, and so am I. And they've been a theme. And right, like the 1 + 1 = like, and you see this in a lot of even in the work I do, where maybe in a relationship, one will make the choice in the personal growth realm, and the other one maybe doesn't want to, right? And then you build that back to that word gap, right? Um, and I was so fortunate that like we have done that together,
Yeah.
and that's what's really special. And so like we're 24 years in 5 months, right? Like it's pretty wild to think about. Um, and each year I know how fortunate I am. So I mean,
Amazing.
just like I'm not here in any form or fashion of the version I am without her.
I love that. That's such a wonderful tribute and a great summary of the power of you both, but her power and strength to know that that's what you needed. I mean, she's kind of saved you a bit, Adam.
Oh, I do
Just
100%. I
like
weighed
more
him
than a
out. Like,
bit. Yeah.
yes.
I love that. And I hope she's listening. And I hope you tell her often. She doesn't have to wait for a podcast to hear it, I hope. Well, I'm really pleased that she's made it on the list. I think it would be an absolute travesty if she hadn't, with that much impact on your life and now being the sort of family unit that you are. And maybe 1+1 is actually 4 if you think about it. You've got 2 kids now,
Hmm.
so that union has produced. But I do get your point about the concept of 2 parts coming together and making more than the sum of those 2 parts.
Yeah.
And I think that's absolutely the right way to describe your partnership. So that's incredible. Okay, well, then who's going to top that? Who's number 4?
So you'll have to tell me if this is wrong or doesn't fit the narrative, but I have to be honest. There's like 9/11 in the collective we of that experience for me. I mean, it's hard for me to talk about impact and influence
Yeah,
without that moment in my life.
fair enough.
Um, but I was thinking more about it because it's the underlying people throughout that entire thread, the experience in and of itself, but is kind of the umbrella, but all the things underneath that. And what I mean is, all right, like the gentleman, I don't know who it was to this day, that I was talking about the boxing match, walking down those steps, right? But do I remain calm or do you not? If I wasn't just randomly having that
Yeah,
conversation,
yeah.
right? Like, the timing of things. Like, what if you had gone up and looked out the window on a break at the top? Or, I always flip through some of the books and you watch the documentaries because, like, the firemen walking up the steps, right? Like, they had masks on and all those things, but I can't imagine. Like, I mean, the courage to just barrel up those stairs.
Yeah,
Like
when
it was,
everybody else is coming down. Yeah, I
yeah.
get you.
And I have it in our gym. We have a gym at home, and in that gym, I have one of the pictures. And I've had that picture of the flag planting, getting that flag on 9/11. You've probably seen it with the firefighters. My parents gave that to me years and years and years ago, and I've had it with me for every move we've ever had or ever made, and it's been somewhere, whether it's in my office or laying on the ground or on the wall, or it's in the gym now because for me, I spend every morning in some form or fashion in there, and it's like that's it. And it's the collective narrative of those people walking down the street, and my mom, right? Maybe, my dad was the first one, my mom, and that tone and understanding and hearing her and the love she has, right? Like she baked those cookies for that party. Um, and like, like, how do I approach my relationship with my kids without them? And how do I approach them without that experience? Because that experience shapes everything, has shapes everything and has shaped everything for me to this day.
But it's
Um,
oh, sorry.
No, 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 no. Like, so it's that moment and the people who were around me in that moment and after that moment that kind of shaped everything about that day.
But it is a deeply human experience. Like you didn't experience it in a vacuum. It wasn't you on your own going down those stairs. It wasn't you on your own walking 5 blocks away. It wasn't you on your own having to live with the aftermath and the coming together. Coming to terms with it all. And there's something about you reframing it that way that is, in a way, so so much more positive than that repeated image of those two towers for weeks afterwards. That was just imprinted on the world's psyche. I mean, I don't know how many times I looked at that image, unhealthily amount of times. And it was a almost like a, I don't know, like, I'm not going to even try and compare to your actual lived experience, but it was a collective sort of trauma for all of us
That's
watching it.
real. Yeah, that's real.
And but then you bringing it down to that kind of deeply human level of, the guy on the conversation about the game, all the things you just said, is like, it just reminds you that on a micro level, on a macro level, we can all think what we think about the world, and humans, them pesky humans. But actually, on a micro level, that's where the real lived experience is, and that's the stuff that stays with you. The big sort of macro traumas, they're a bit dreamlike in some ways. You experience them, but then they fade. But the humans, the actual micro experiences, they're the things that really stay with you. So to me, that's really powerful, because it's almost like go for that really big, like I say, that image to those micro experiences. Well, I know you couldn't not have that on the list, and it's a collective of humans. I think you have now exceeded Helen Normoyle's excessive 20. I think you've blown it now. This is now going to be, this whole format's ruined now, Adam. It's all your fault.
There's way too many participants in that one.
But they're all very worthy. Oh, wonderful. Okay, well, do you mind if we move on to number 5? Because I've got a couple of other things I want to ask you.
Yeah.
But who's the? I know they're no particular order, but it is a finale. So who is the final one?
Staying in the cliched glide path, my two sons.
Oh, of course.
I mean, yeah, that I have written down that quote I mentioned earlier, and the quote goes, "Making the decision to have a child, it is momentous. It is to decide forever to have your heart go walking around outside your body." And it's Elizabeth Stone. And what hit home for me is, I mean, there's parents everywhere, and everyone has their own story and narrative of being a parent, right? We all are on our own journey in that experience. For me, what it did was pull forward that thing we just talked about and helped me understand so many more things in my life. What I mean is, back to that conversation with my mom when I called home, I understood what it meant. It took years, decade later, but I really understand what it meant. Like the tears of whatever on her side, right? Like the panic I have had, like even missing, like in the store, and I can't see my kid for
for a second.
I'm sweating and my heart skips a beat.
Yeah.
And there's my mom watching something play out on television, having no idea what is happening until I pick up that phone. And so my two kids, right? Like, I think we all are selfish. There's things I think about, right? Like in the growth work that I do, it's like self-awareness, self-interest, and self-transcendence are really, in my point, like your 3 components. A lot of people get caught in that self-awareness and self-interest bucket, right? Meaning, they never get past that idea of self-interest, right? It always kind of can come back to about me, right? Like you've probably had conversations with people, I know I have, where it's kind of swings back around. It's always about what's on that other side. And the mix of that collective experience and glide path in my life and all these people led to that piece of my kids, because what I started to understand is having my kids became a moment of self-transcendence, meaning, look, I'm just, you used that term a little bit earlier, but like, I'm just this little dot in this time of space flying around on this rock in what may be an infinite universe if you peeled the blue away, like, and right, like, and then there's these 2 humans, And like, I am here to try to just give them and help them be the best versions of themselves. And it's a
Mm,
collective, right? And what they helped me translate is, look, yeah, like, this is my family. I always talk like, hey, help yourself, help your family, help others, kind of in that approach. And I mean, like, they've taught me, look, right, whoever that person is that may be struggling, or whoever that collective we, your community, or all this, look, like, we just all, you're trying to help all those people too, right? Like, so I
mm,
started to like, they helped teach that lesson, right? Like, there's them, but they also helped me understand that bigger piece, what my mom was experiencing, and what another parent maybe go through, and what another child may be going through. So, like, all of those four people I've referenced, those experiences, everything I have shared, are showing up in these two humans that I'm trying to help, give them a
yeah.
little slice of life.
I totally get what you're saying. And I think it is uniquely an experience of being a parent. I don't think you can really compare it with anything else. But that idea of kind of looking beyond yourself and being responsible for two other life forms, that you've brought into the world. And it's a difficult one because, it's almost like everyone should be made to do it in some ways because it gives you such a different worldview. And it's the ultimate in empathy, isn't it? It's the ultimate. You're kind of so you're tuned into your children at a cellular level. It's like, I don't know. It's really hard to express it, but it does change you. It's definitely, I can relate to parenting like that, like pre-mum and post-mum. The pre-mum Julia was very different to the post-mum Julia.
Yeah.
And I know what you mean by that heart on the outside thing. It's like, I don't know, my son was out in a football match this weekend and there was trouble. And now, thankfully, I didn't know about that trouble till he walked in the door. But, two people were killed, which is terrible. And all kinds of bother like that can happen after a big game. And I'm very thankful that he's home and safe with me today. And had I known about that, what that journey might have been like for me, whether I would have had the same, you know, release of when I picture your mum getting that phone call, and I know you can relate to this now that you're a dad. I feel like the noises that would have come out of her would not have even been particularly human. It would be just like an animalistic sound of sheer relief, and that. I honestly, that's what I picture when you talk about her. And I think until you have children, you don't really know what that feels like. That connection you have with them. So I'm really glad that you put them on the list. And there's such a next generation thing. We've talked about your granddad, your dad, you as now a father, and now you're a father to two boys. And having a boy of my own, I have a daughter as well. There is a unique, shall we say, responsibility in raising them in a certain way. Young boys are extremely impressionable. Can be extremely reckless, especially when they've got developing brains. But they're also so precious, and they're so little boys, really. And
Hmm.
for a boy to go into a man, I think takes a long time. It's a bit like Labradors, I like to say. Have you ever had a Labrador? It can take a long time to settle down.
I mean, I can attest to that in my own personal experience.
Yeah, you know what I mean? So boys in particular, girls
I,
grow up super fast because they're like supposed to make babies from whenever,
I
and
think
but boys take such a long time.
there's a lot of truth to it. I mean, I look at my own life, right? Like, there's
Yeah.
that pre and post version, and I mean, my two boys, I learn lessons from them every day, because
Mm,
they they help me understand what gratitude means.
yeah.
They help me understand of, like, how do I want to show up each and every day in my life,
Mm,
right? Like, we are given choices of how we want to show up,
yeah.
right? And they help me choose how I want to show up, how I want to show up with my relationship with my spouse,
Mm-hmm.
how I want to show up with my relationship with my parents as a son,
Yeah.
how I want to show up in my relationship with my friends, right? Like, I tell my boys I love them. I'm sure at some point my oldest is getting close to her, like, Dad, don't, why
That's
would you say
enough.
that? But I also, they've probably heard me I tell my friends, my friends are
Yeah.
scattered across the country, and I'll text them and tell them I love them, or I'll look
Yeah.
for,
But
like,
that's so important. You're modeling for them all the time, and they're modeling for you. No, I love it, and it's so heartwarming to hear a father talk so warmly about emotion and that kind of showing their sensitive side to their boys. There's a lot to talk about that at the moment. We haven't needed another podcast, Adam, to talk about that subject. But I do believe that back to my point of okay, I said it about dogs, but the boys to men is such a long process. It's such a long process because I think there's so few really great role models for them at the moment, and I do worry a bit. And my son is not immune to the world. Let's put it that way. And I think it does need great care, particularly from their dads, on how to raise them. Good. Well, we've come to the end of the 5, Adam. We've got the pretty good list. Some very awesome people. And normally about now, I ask what kind of key qualities have you taken from these? But I'm going to list off a few that I've picked up on. So there's the courage,
mhm,
curiosity.
mhm,
I think this idea of gratitude, appreciating time and the gift that is, and making the most of your time. I don't know, being just showing up, as you say, as just the best version of yourself that you can be, and helping others to do that. So, if I missed anything, that's specifically a result of knowing that list of 5, well, 4 people and one experience, one huge experience.
I think you hit the nail on the head. I'm,
Yay!
no, honestly, right? Like everything you just shared is, what I think about. And when I think
Mm,
about these people and have them in my life, that's what I hope. I hope they see that. One of the
yeah,
exercises so in my work now, one of the exercises I give people is I make them pick 5 people, and they have to write a gratitude letter and give them a small token or gift, right?
nice.
And I go through I do all of the exercises. I've done them on my own, and as I've built them, and that's it, right? Like I've written those letters.
Where's this whole podcast, Adam? This
Yeah,
whole podcast is one big gratitude letter. I guess it's pretty
exactly
obvious.
right. That's why I love it. Like it's so spot on.
Oh, good.
And I
What is
think
it? Sorry, go on.
well, sorry, and I just the last piece of it is I think I would recommend to anyone tell those
Yeah,
people,
yeah.
right?
What they mean.
Because I mean, when you see the other side, when you do share that, like there's nothing that feels better.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's why I'm doing all of this. I think I just want to create a platform for people and a comfortable place for people to actually share how they really feel about the people that matter to them. Okay, talking of gratitude then. So the next thing I like to ask my guests, because if you've had, all these great people in your life, and I know the 9/11 thing is so significant and you can't ever say, oh, I want to go give thanks to that. But kind of there is a little bit of a gratitude for that experience, gratitude for life, for surviving it, and just how much it's impacted your life. So my next question is always, well, what's next for you in terms of this continuation of this theme of honoring? Like I always talk about in the paying forward. What are you going to do with all this investment in you? How are you going to go forward in the world? What are you going to put into it? What do you want to give back or give forward?
Well, one, it's a wonderful question, and two, I do say, right, like that experience, the big one for me, right place, right time. Um,
Hmm.
I don't become this version of myself, whatever it is, without that experience.
Yeah.
I don't do the thing. I don't think would have done the things I've been able to do, meet the people I have been able to meet. Um, to your point, you used the word courage, right? My wife and I moved out of the town and, left and moved 2,000 miles away because, right, there was some courage there to go out and find what else is out in the world.
Hmm.
Um, and to circle that back in my current world. So after, a lot of time in the wealth management space, I have kind of pivoted careers a little bit. Um, just whatever we want to use about, again, back to words and definitions, to where I'm in the, I guess you would call the personal and executive coaching world. Um, and really what I believe and what I am trying to do and what, to be honest, my purpose is, I think, in my life is to help others live the best version of themselves, whatever that is. And using the things that I have learned,
Yeah.
right? That, you know, time, to your point, time is our greatest currency. It truly is, right? You can make more money, you can buy
Hmm.
more things, you can do all of that. You really can't fill up the time bucket and find more. We don't know when our last week is. And that's a heavy lift for a lot of people because I think we often ignore that. So what I am trying to do in this current version of life is how can I give back and help others in that form and fashion? How can I help my community? Right? We talked about summers, but also like how can I have we came back because this is where I was born and raised in Northeast Ohio. Is there a way I can put a positive impact on my community and
Hmm.
help others? The people on that list, right? My parents are getting older, right? Like, how can I be a positive experience in their life as they grow and maybe they need me more than they had in the past? Um, in the coaching work I do, right? And you see this, and really the wellness work, I guess, more broadly, you probably like we could cite the statistics, we can cite the data in the for example, in the United States about health, both
Hmm.
physical and mental, right? Like we have a lot of gaps and a lot of issues. We're seeing that play out across the board. Technology has exacerbated all these things. AI on the way, who even knows, right? Like that's a
Hmm.
whole talk about a long podcast, right? Um, so what I am trying to do is just help others through my shared narrative, my shared experience, the tools and resources based with, the science behind it and helping people live their best version. And whether that is understanding that I need to change my relationship with my physical self and become a better version because I want to be playing with my grandkids on the ground in 20 years,
Hmm. Yeah.
or when we retire, right? How often do you hear like when we retire, that's when we're going to travel and play golf and do all the experiences. And you get there and you actually physically can't even do a lot of these things.
You know,
Or
we have an expression in our house, Adam. It's not particularly profound, but it says, "Let's do the things we can while our legs still work." I mean, that's literally what we say,
that's
because
real.
you don't want to save it all up. Because if you save it all up, A, you may not get there, and B, your legs might not work. So no, I totally get that
Yeah,
framing.
and so that's what I'm trying to do. I have a firm now that we've kind of spun out called the 903 Collective, and it's myself with my partners, therapists, nutritionists, trainers, doctors. And really, what we're trying to do is just give people the support, the
Mm.
collective community. And I really believe that is an important piece because I learned that back to that 1 + 1 = 3. I could have had that experience, and if I had tried to go it alone or didn't have the people, right people around me, you don't know. And
But
that's the piece.
yeah, but I suppose the bit I'm hearing more than anything is, it's almost like if you've had a big life experience, you've lived a big life. So, there's no getting away from it. That experience that day makes you special. It just does, Adam. It's like it just, even if you did nothing with it, it would still make you special. You were there, and you experienced it. But the fact you've chosen to do something with it, that lived experience, how you've overcome that adversity, how you've shaped the rest of your life based on that experience. It's really valuable to the right people. If people are open and want to hear what you have to say and be open to your thoughts, there's nothing more powerful than lived experience passed on. We can all read the books. That's and we should. You know, but it's the people that have actually truly lived it that their words have just that much more impact, because you have that behind it. So I think the fact you're taking all of that and adding that with adding other like-minded people and creating that collective as a force of good for the community, for the individuals, I think that's enough paying forward, Adam. That's well done. No more paying forward. Just do that.
Well,
Nothing more. But, don't worry about being a good dad. Irrelevant. Don't worry about that partner thing. Wife will be fine. No. It's everything else as well, I know. But you get my point. It's like, if you just did that, that's a wonderful way of taking everything that you've experienced thus far and kind of doing something good with it. So, listen, last question then. Have you prepared? Who shall I speak to next and why? I may have forgotten to ask you to do it.
No, I am prepared. I haven't prepared them 100%. So
Okay, that's fine.
I think you shared with me you like the surprise of experiences. There's a gentleman named Anthony Wingate,
Anthony
and
Wingate.
wonderful human, somebody who I met out west when we were both young. I would say best friend, super close best friends, the guy I talk to or text every day, probably talk to every couple of days, who's had a unique experience of his own, from a high level athlete to, a mom who he lost, and, all the unique experiences in between. Someone who believes in a lot of similar narratives that we've talked about today. I think he would be wonderful. And, he's also out, I believe, in your old stomping grounds in the LA area. So.
Oh, well, I was a Valley girl for about a year. Did I tell you this? I did try and be a Valley girl. I didn't really pull it off. I think the accent gave it away. In fact, I remember within seconds of, I think I even looked different. I think you just know, don't you? And no, I couldn't pull that off. But so he's from that way. Okay, brilliant. Well, Anthony, if you're listening, I'm coming for you. Hook us up over email. Let's see if we can make that happen.
He's wonderful.
Brilliant. All right. Well, listen, I introduced a new thing. I'm not one for innovation. It's not that innovative, actually. But it's like, just anything else you'd like to share, and also signpost anyone to you. So where can they find out more about you and 903 Collective and all the other things you're doing?
Yeah, you can find my LinkedIn page. You can find the 903 Collective website, which ironic timing, should be live this week as we've been building all of this out. I do a lot of writing in LinkedIn. I have a Substack. Just what I have found is, I think you shared this like lived experience, but I think about it as storytelling. And one of my partners in this business talks about narrative therapy and does that work with patients. And it was much like most things in my life. I've kind of found all of this incidentally, and it's been very fun to just start to put all this stuff on paper. So you can kind of find those stories and those narratives, because we're all the author of our own journey. And, you can find all of those kind of things woven out there. So if anybody wants to follow along, wonderful. But, it's just been fun.
Well, listen, I know we've done a full story arc there then. So I'm going to play on the riff on the whole story thing. First of all, story arc, because we began at the beginning talking about Matt Ziegler, who is the ultimate storyteller.
Yes.
If you want to listen to his episode of People Are Everything, it was remarkable. And I totally agree about this idea of how you can tell your own story, because you can tell a story of, okay, let's play with this. We can tell a story of a guy who was 22, who was in New York at the wrong place, wrong time. That experience, made him, fear the world, fear danger, fear loss and grief. Therefore, he minimized his life such that he couldn't, so that something bad like that would never happen again. Right? That's a story. That's a version of that happening. Or we could say, here's a story of a 22-year-old who, from that experience, learned that life is precious, that human beings are where it's all at, that he was going to learn to love and live as authentically and fully as anyone ever could, fueled by that. So even looking forward and looking back, you can decide, can't you? What's the narrative you're going to say to yourself? What's the narrative you're going to live by? And it is a choice. If you take the time to stop and think, it is a choice. So let's finish there then. We sound very deep and profound now, Adam.
Well,
I probably nicked that off someone. I probably,
no, I don't think.
I think. Listen, I'm really honoured that you shared your story with me. I know I have heard bits of it before, so I did know. Obviously, I was very keen to hear that story about 9/11, but it's not all of you, is it? It's a part of you, and the rest of everything else you're doing is just as inspiring and interesting. And I do want to come to Ohio. I'm sure it's marvelous. These Great Lakes sound great. I think I'd like to come and see them. I like kayaking, just so you know.
We have that.
Well, then I'm there. If there's a kayak, I'm coming. But in all seriousness, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me today. It's been an absolute pleasure. And I wish you the very best of the rest of your day. I'm going to bed. No, have a great rest of the day. And thank you so much for talking to me.
No, thank you. It's a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Well, that was Adam, and we could have talked for hours more. And I think there's probably about 5 spin-off episodes we could have done on some of the subjects we covered. Yeah, what a remarkable story, and an example of how you can turn something quite terrible into something very positive. If you like that conversation, please subscribe, like, comment, or share with a friend, or get in touch. Maybe you'd like to talk to me about your 5. Until next time, take care for now. Bye-bye now.